10 days before my company's $280 million nationwide retail expansion deal, they cut me loose. At the final signing, their lawyers froze. The critical supply chain optimization patent had my name on it. What I did not know then was that this final signing was really the last scheduled negotiation session before the contracts went to the board for approval. The deal was not dead yet, but my patent had just put the brakes on everything. Until that day, they had danced around the topic of intellectual property, brushing it aside in vague language. I came into the meeting with a copy of the patent folded in my briefcase. I laid it flat on the table. I had kept that patent in my possession for years, filed long before my first day at FreshPath. I never planned to reveal it without reason, but watching them sidestep every mention of intellectual property in our meetings had been reason enough. I didn't expect today to be the moment it mattered, but if they were going to pretend it didn't exist, I was going to make sure they couldn't ignore it any longer. That is when the shouting began. I am 41. For most of my adult life, I was a logistics manager from Texas who slowly rebuilt himself into a systems developer. 11 years with FreshPath Logistics. That company became my second home, though it never felt warm. We built algorithms that moved products from warehouses to store shelves so customers never saw empty space. I had started in the warehouses, pulling pallets in the summer heat. Nights were spent learning code on a second-hand laptop, building small programs to help track shipments. Eventually, I was promoted into the back office, then into product development. My focus became prediction, software that could see a shortage coming days before it happened and reroute stock in time. FreshPath invested heavily in the idea. We tested for months, ran simulations during peak holiday seasons, and stress-tested the system during storms that shut down major highways. I missed holidays. I canceled vacations. I slept in conference rooms during pilot launches. The algorithm worked. Executives began referring to it as the core of the pending nationwide expansion. $280 million worth of core. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the email arrived. 4:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had just wrapped a call with our distribution center in Phoenix. The subject line read, "Change in status." The body was one sentence. Your services are no longer required. No signature. No explanation. Just that. I looked at the old steel mug on my desk. The same one I had carried when I was loading trucks, back before anyone in a suit knew my name. 11 years of late nights, missed birthdays, and canceled plans reduced to a single line of text. I logged out of my accounts. Security was already outside my office door. One of them offered to carry my things, but I had nothing to take except the mug. I walked past people I had trained, people who had built their own careers on top of mine. They kept their eyes down. By the time I reached the parking lot, the Arizona sun was low, casting long shadows between the rows of cars. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had just heard. I ignored them. The only thing I could think about was that every piece of code running their supply chain still carried my signature. And one specific piece, the one at the center of the deal, carried something more than that. It carried my legal claim. That day, I left with nothing but the mug. It would not stay that way for long. Through the weekend, I stayed quiet. I avoided calls from anyone connected to FreshPath. Monday morning, the headlines broke. FreshPath merger collapses over IP conflict. My phone lit up again, this time from people outside the company, old contacts, a few industry reporters, even a former client asking what I had done to them. The article was short. It mentioned unresolved ownership of proprietary software and cited unnamed sources saying the issue could derail the entire expansion. It did not mention me by name, but I knew exactly what they were talking about. The next morning, I found a thick yellow envelope in my mailbox. The return address was from a law firm in Chicago, MarketSphere Holdings, the very company planning to buy FreshPath. I had never spoken to anyone there directly, so seeing their name in my mail was enough to stop me on the front porch. Inside was a printed copy of a U.S. patent. Across the top, in plain type, it read, Adaptive Supply Chain Management and Retail Shortage Prevention System. I skimmed down to the inventor field. One name. Mine. It had been years since I looked at it. I had filed it after months of testing an early version of my system in a small distribution network. The language was dry, full of technical claims, but every line described the exact engine now running FreshPath's operations. And, apparently, the exact engine at the heart of MarketSphere's planned expansion. The letter attached to the patent was blunt. It stated that MarketSphere's legal team was reviewing the scope of the claims and requested confirmation of my ownership. No legal threats, no offers. Just a request to discuss the matter promptly. I sat at my kitchen table with the document spread out in front of me. In the space of a week, I had gone from being cut out entirely to holding a piece of paper that could stall, or even sink, a deal worth hundreds of millions. Part of me wanted to believe they had sent it as a courtesy, that this was just due diligence before finalizing the acquisition. But another part, the part that had read the email ending my career without warning, knew better. If MarketSphere had my patent in their hands, it meant they were already preparing for a fight. I thought about the executives in that signing room freezing when they saw the copy I had brought. Until then, they had worked around the subject, making it sound like a minor formality. They had no idea that I had filed and secured the patent before my first day at FreshPath. Holding the envelope, I realized the balance had shifted. For years, I had given everything to make the system work. Now the system, my system, had given me something back. Not money, not a job, leverage. I did not call MarketSphere that day. I did not answer any reporters. I made a single copy of the patent and put the original in a locked drawer. I knew this paper could turn everything upside down. The only question was how far I was willing to go to use it. 6 years earlier, before the expansion was even an idea, my mentor Paul Gardner had told me to file the patent in my own name. Not through the company, not through their legal department. Just me. He said it like it was a rule, not a suggestion. Back then, I had already built the core of the system. The code was rough, and the interface was ugly, but the logic worked. Paul had seen me run it in a small regional network, months before I joined FreshPath. He knew that if it ever turned into something bigger, it would have value far beyond my paycheck. We went to an independent attorney, paid cash, and filed quietly. It was clean. My employment contract at FreshPath was clear. Anything created before my start date belonged to me. Paul made me keep dated records of the prototypes, the emails, and the data runs. He said one day I might need proof. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. FreshPath had just given me an offer that doubled my salary. They were talking about long-term plans, growth, and the shared mission. I had no reason to think I would ever need to defend what I had built. Now I understood exactly what he meant. I was still staring at the patent in my kitchen when my phone rang. The caller ID showed FreshPath's main line. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, the same number called again. This time I picked up. It was the CEO. His tone was low and measured, not the clipped, energetic voice I was used to in meetings. He said he wanted to clear the air about the patent situation. He asked if I could come in to talk, off the record, just the two of us. I told him I was busy. There was a pause. Then his voice softened, almost oily. He said, "Let's resolve this quietly. No lawyers. No press. Nobody has to know." It was not a threat, but it was not a request either. I hung up without making any promises. My first instinct was to call Paul. He answered on the second ring. I told him what had happened. The envelope from MarketSphere, the call from the CEO. He laughed once, short and humorless. Then he said, "I told you to keep a card in your pocket. This is it. Do not fold now." I asked what he thought they would do next. He said they would try to scare me, push me into signing something, or convince me to give up the rights for a small payout. And if that failed, they would stall the deal until I became desperate. That night, I could not shake the sound of the CEO's voice. He had not mentioned the value of the patent. He had not tried to argue that it belonged to the company. He had gone straight to keeping it out of sight. That told me everything I needed to know about how much trouble it could cause them. The paper in my drawer was no longer just a record of something I had built years ago. It was leverage, and I had to decide how to use it before they found a way to take it from me. The next morning, I called Paul again. I told him I was not sure how far I wanted to push this. He did not hesitate. "You push it all the way," he said. "This is the crack in their wall. They will spend months trying to patch it. Do not give it to them for free." Before we hung up, he gave me a name, Rachel Kraus. "She handles patent disputes," he said. She has gone against companies bigger than FreshPath and walked away with her clients' rights intact. Call her today. Rachel answered on the first try. I explained who I was, what I had built, and what had happened in the last week. She was calm, almost detached, until I told her that MarketSphere had already contacted me. That changed her tone. If they are in direct contact with you, they think you can hurt FreshPath more than they can. That is good for you, but they will try to box you in. They will use pressure, deadlines, and a lot of legal language meant to scare you. Do not respond to anything without me seeing it first. She told me to send her copies of the patent and my original documentation. Within an hour, she confirmed what Paul had always said. I owned it outright. FreshPath could claim they had invested in improvements, but the core system was mine. Later that afternoon, an email from FreshPath's HR department landed in my inbox. It was a final request to return my company-issued laptop, external drives, and any devices containing confidential company data. The list was oddly specific. They even mentioned any documents related to proprietary algorithms. Rachel read the email and called it a bluff. They are phishing, she said. They want you to think you have something of theirs. They want you nervous enough to hand over whatever they ask for, including your own property. Ignore it. Ignoring it felt risky. For years, I had trained myself to follow procedure, to keep the company happy. Now I was doing the opposite. But every time I thought about giving in, I remembered the way they had cut me out without warning. That evening, Paul texted, "They are going to come back with an offer. It will sound generous. It will be a trap." The next day, Rachel sent a short letter to both FreshPath and MarketSphere, stating that I was the sole owner of the patent, that it had been developed before my employment at FreshPath, and that I had no intention of transferring any rights without direct negotiation. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was not reacting to them. They were reacting to me. I knew it would not last forever. They still had more lawyers, more money, and more reach than I did. But I had something they could not buy outright. And with Rachel in the loop, I was ready to make them play by my terms. It was the first moment since that Wednesday afternoon that I felt I could set the pace. 2 days after Rachel's letter went out, I got an email from the CEO's assistant asking if I could meet him for a brief private discussion away from the office. The message named a hotel downtown and said he had reserved a table in a private dining room. Rachel told me to take the meeting, but to make no agreements and record everything I could remember afterward. "They are trying to get you off the chessboard," she said. "Do not move unless it is your choice." The restaurant was quiet, almost empty. A server led me to a small room with a single table set for two. The CEO was already there. He stood when I walked in, smiling like nothing had happened between us. He opened with small talk about the weather and traffic, but within minutes he shifted. He said he had been thinking about my contribution and wanted to find a mutually beneficial resolution. He offered a one-time bonus, well into 6 figures, a new title in a division he claimed would be built around my expertise, and a public acknowledgement of my role in the expansion deal. He spoke like it was a reward, like he was giving me a gift. I let him finish, then reached into my bag and pulled out a single folder. Inside was the notice Rachel had prepared, a formal statement that I was in exclusive talks with MarketSphere to license the patent. I slid it across the table. "You are not in the deal," I said. For the first time since I had known him, he had no answer ready. His hand froze on the glass of water in front of him. He stared at the document without touching it. I could see him calculating how much of this was real and how much was bluff. "It is not too late to work together," he said finally, his voice lower now. "It is," I replied. I stood, thanked him for his time, and left the room without waiting for the check. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. MarketSphere's legal team had confirmed they were ready to move forward, but only if we acted fast. FreshPath had scheduled another board review in less than a week, and they wanted the patent issue resolved before then. That night, I signed an exclusivity agreement with MarketSphere. It was short, clear, and binding. For the next 30 days, they were the only party allowed to negotiate for the rights to my patent. I knew FreshPath would find out quickly, and when they did, the quiet offers and polite calls would stop. But that was the point. After months of being treated like a replaceable part, I had put myself in a position they could not ignore or control. Walking out of that hotel, I did not feel like I had won. I felt like I had just lit the match. Within a week of signing the exclusivity agreement, MarketSphere made their move. Their attorneys worked through a weekend, pulling every filing, every timestamp, every shred of documentation, proving the system existed before my first day at FreshPath. On Monday morning, they sent me a contract. The purchase price and signing bonus were spelled out in black and white. It was more than enough to clear my mortgage and cover my younger brother's surgery, which had been sitting on a payment plan for months. They did not haggle, and they did not drag it out. The transfer went through in less than 48 hours. Rachel called after the deal closed. "That's it," she said. "They own it now, and you're done with FreshPath. Let them fight it out from here." I thought I would feel a rush, some kind of triumph. Instead, I just felt the weight lift. For the first time in years, I had no deadlines, no late-night calls from warehouses, no sudden, urgent meetings to fix problems caused by someone else. The money hit my account on a Thursday. By Friday morning, the first lawsuit against FreshPath was filed, a supplier claiming breach of contract tied to the stalled expansion. Rachel emailed me a copy. The patent was listed in the complaint as a material cause of the disruption. I did not call Paul right away. I knew he would just say it was inevitable. Instead, I wired the payment to the hospital for my brother and sent a final check to clear the last balance on my house. The bank sent confirmation before noon. That night, I got a voicemail from the CEO. It was 47 seconds long. He started with my name, then paused like he was deciding how to continue. He said he regretted how things had unfolded. He said the board had not been fully informed. He said they had always valued my work. I deleted it without listening to the rest. FreshPath stayed in the news for the next several weeks. MarketSphere was never mentioned directly, but the articles talked about a competing offer for proprietary technology and a sudden shift in operational strategy. I kept my phone on silent most of the day. The only people I answered were Rachel and my brother. Everyone else could wait. The silence was strange at first. I had been running at full speed for so long that slowing down felt unnatural. But every time I thought about reaching out to someone at FreshPath, I remembered the one-sentence email that ended my job. That was all the closure I needed. I had no illusions about what came next. They would move on, rebuild, try to work around what they had lost. But they would never get back the exact system I had built, and they would never own my name on that patent. In the end, the deal gave me something more than money. It gave me the ability to walk away and to stay gone. MarketSphere offered me a position 2 weeks after the deal closed. Director of Intellectual Property Protection. The title sounded heavier than anything I had carried before, but the work was straightforward. Keep their innovations secure, lock down ownership early, and make sure no one else could do to them what FreshPath had tried to do to me. I accepted, not because I needed the income, but because it felt like the right place to stand after what had happened. On my first day, I brought the dented stainless steel mug. It went on the corner of my desk before I even powered on my computer. Nobody in the office asked about it, but I noticed a few glances. I kept it there for myself, not for them. The job came with a small team, 3 attorneys and 2 analysts. They were sharp, quick to learn, and used to moving quietly. We reviewed filings from every department, flagged anything that needed protection, and filed patents before projects left the design stage. It was different from the chaos of logistics. There were no calls in the middle of the night, no warehouse managers shouting about missed shipments. The work was deliberate. Every move was documented. Every conversation was logged. Still, I knew I was not just another hire for MarketSphere. They had seen what happened with FreshPath. They had watched me hold my ground. They wanted that mindset inside their walls. One afternoon, while reviewing a stack of new applications, I found myself staring at the names on the inventor lines. Younger engineers, some barely out of school, were listed next to ideas they had clearly spent months on. I made sure each one of them had the paperwork to prove it was theirs before it became the company's. I told them, in plain terms, to always keep a copy. No one else needed to know why I cared so much about that detail. Every morning, before meetings, I would take a minute to drink from that steel mug. It was a reminder that leverage is not something you stumble into. You build it, piece by piece, often without realizing it. And once you have it, you do not give it away. Paul called once in a while to check in. He never asked about Fresh Path directly. He just wanted to know if I was keeping the cards close. I told him I was. The new role gave me distance, but it did not erase what had happened. I still caught myself replaying that Wednesday afternoon. The subject line, the one-sentence email, the quiet walk past the desks of people who would not look at me. I was not angry anymore, but I was not about to forget. Every file I signed off on, every patent I locked down, was another way of making sure that what happened to me never happened to someone working under my watch. The mug stayed in its place, untouched by anyone else. It was my own silent contract, and I intended to keep it. It was a quiet Thursday morning when Paul sent me a text. No greeting, no explanation, just a photo. The image showed an empty office with half-dismantled cubicles and stacks of file boxes pushed against one wall. I recognized it instantly, the patent department at FreshPath's headquarters. Beneath the photo was a single caption, empty shelves. I stared at it for a moment before replying with one word, clean. There was no follow-up. Paul never wasted words, and I did not need more. Whatever was happening inside FreshPath, they were cutting deep. Maybe they were downsizing after the failed deal, or maybe they were purging anything connected to me. Either way, I was not going to step back into it. 2 days later, when I checked my office mailbox, I found a large envelope with no return address. The handwriting on the front was blocky and uneven, the kind you see when someone is trying to disguise it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of my old patent. Across the center, in thick black marker, was a cross that nearly covered the text. There was nothing else. No note. No signature. No explanation. I turned it over in my hands, looking for something that might tell me who sent it. There was nothing. Whoever had mailed it had taken care to leave no fingerprints, figuratively or literally. I considered throwing it out right there, but I did not. I slid it back into the envelope and locked it in my bottom desk drawer, next to the original patent and a few other documents I kept for my own protection. Rachel's voice was in my head. If they are doing something this petty, it means they do not have a better move. Still, I could not shake the thought that someone at FreshPath wanted me to see it. Maybe they thought it would rattle me. Maybe they wanted me to think this was not over. For the rest of the day, I caught myself glancing at the drawer. I did not feel fear exactly. More like a reminder that the other side of the table still had people willing to spend time on me, even now. That night, I told Paul about the envelope. He just said, "Then you are still in their head. Good. Stay there." It was the kind of advice only Paul could deliver, part warning, part encouragement. I decided not to bring it up with Market's fear. There was nothing actionable in a photocopy with a cross on it, and I was not going to start looking over my shoulder for shadows. But I kept it. Not as a threat, not as a trophy, just as a record. Because if this game had taught me anything, it was that every piece, no matter how small, might matter later. The envelope stayed in the drawer, and the mug stayed on my desk. Both reminders, for very different reasons. I never figured out who sent the envelope. There were a few names I could have guessed, but guessing would not change anything. The next morning, I made coffee in the office kitchen, same as always, and filled the dented steel mug. I carried it back to my desk and set it down in its usual spot. The envelope stayed locked in the drawer. I had no reason to open it again. The days settled into a steady rhythm. Meetings with engineers, calls with outside counsel, filing dates, approvals. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make a headline. That was fine with me. From time to time, I would get industry updates that mentioned FreshPath. Most of them were about restructuring, management changes, or streamlining operations. No more talk of nationwide expansion. No mention of the merger that had been days away. I did not go looking for details. If they wanted to run on whatever system they had cobbled together, that was their problem. My name was still on the patent they could not touch, and that was enough. Paul visited once, unannounced, on a Friday afternoon. He stood in my doorway, looking at the mug on the desk, and just nodded. We went out for coffee, talked about nothing important, and he left without bringing up FreshPath. That was his way of saying everything that needed to be said. A few weeks later, I was on the balcony outside the office. The city noise was faint up there, just the occasional siren or horn. I had the mug in my hand, the coffee still hot. The sky was pale with the first hint of evening. I thought about the first day I carried that mug out of FreshPath, the quiet hallway, the the people avoiding eye contact, the walk to the parking lot with everything I owned in one hand. I thought about the email, the headlines, the private meeting in the hotel, the envelope with the black cross. None of it had been part of any plan, but each move, each decision not to fold, had led here. Inside, someone called my name. I took one last sip, set the mug down on the railing, and went back to work. Later that night, I stayed behind after most of the office had cleared out. The building was quiet, lights low except for the glow from my desk lamp. I unlocked the drawer and looked at the envelope one more time. I did not take it out. I just made sure it was still there. I locked the drawer again, turned off the lamp, and picked up the mug. Walking out, I did not think about Fresh Path, or the deal, or the money. I thought about the one thing that had not changed through all of it, the fact that my work, my decisions, and my future were in my own hands. That was not something I was going to sign away. Thank you for watching till the end. Let's keep the story alive. Drop a comment below. And of course, subscribe for the next video.